as we were finishing What Dreams May Come, my job on the tech was pretty much over. It was down to the artist then to finish it, and Matrix was coming really quick. John, who is an amazing visualist, and one of the secret weapons of working with John is that he's not deep in the technical details in the slightest. So quite often you find yourself with these crazy challenges that you've got to solve because John thought they were possible, even though he doesn't know how to do them. And that's where we ended up on Bullet Time, and trying to get it from the test that they'd done with this optical flow stuff to actually something that could be good enough to put in a movie was something that needed my attention and needed the team's attention. So that's how I got into Matrix. Working on that movie, we had a bunch of traditional visual effects artists. And if you remember, just before Matrix, or a few years before, Keanu had done Johnny Mnemonic. And it wasn't well accepted by either the visual effects community or the film community. Oh, another Keanu Reeves virtual reality movie? Oh my God, this is going to be terrible. And we all believed in it because Lana and Lily, we had early cuts. John was super collaborative. We were doing previs, I think PLF had done some of the early previs for the movie, and then every bullet time shot was done by the guy called Dan Clem inside our production team at Mannix Visual Effects. Mass Illusion went to Mass Illusions, went to Mannix. It was all the same continuum of people. But
heard plenty of stories in between that to escape and all the fun things that we won't get into, but just navigating the business or visa side of things for a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of history there.
There's a lot of history, and the challenge was we were doing things in ways that nobody else in the visual effects business was doing them at the time. We deployed an equal balance between artistry and computer science. And although all visual effects companies had decent engineers, we were so bold in the stuff that we were deploying. Especially when you look at Matrix Reloaded, digital humans, image-based lighting, volumetrics, global illumination, ray tracing, like crazy. It's like a laundry list of SIGGRAPH papers for the 10 years leading up to the point we made that movie. And we just had a very different way of working. And, the artists really, really became one. We were like a family. So going between all them projects, it was this continuum of people that knew how to work together and knew how to not be afraid to do new things. Working on the first movie, it was very hard to get crew. Like I was saying, nobody wanted to work on it. Nobody wanted to work on The Matrix. It's so funny because people I see years later, and I'm like, you remember that interview that we had and you pretty much gave us the finger? Well, The Matrix turned out to be a big deal. And they're like, yeah, biggest regret. And somebody, big shot supervisor, I think I know her, I'm not going to say what her name is, ended up going on to Wild Wild West instead of Matrix.
I'm sure everybody on that movie has regrets about being on that movie.
It was difficult because the storyboards, what traditional stuff, well, actually it's changed a lot since Matrix, but in the old days, storyboards were pretty much sketches, yeah? And they were purely to convey motion and camera and not really lots of detail. But then you get this, we'd get this binder of comic book storyboards that you'd never see on a normal movie. You wouldn't see it. So people straight away is like, oh my God, people don't know what they're doing here. This is totally different. The bullet time stuff itself, which was my responsibility, along with my friend Rodney Iwashina, God rest his soul, passed away a few years ago. We had to run a very complicated process to get, and remember, bullet time wasn't shot on digital cameras. It's shot on film. And anybody who knows stills film that is a motion picture person knows that they're not pin registered. So trying to get 122 cameras worth of stuff that doesn't flicker, that doesn't shake, that doesn't have crazy vignetting all over the place, that has to be repositioned because we're doing nodal tilt overrides, crazy complicated. And there's a Bible. It's actually Rodney Iwashina, his wife and kids are the guardians of that book. There's only one copy of it. I've never made a copy of it, but it's 100 steps in how to do a bullet time shot. And people would just, the very small team of artists that we had on it would complain continuously, except for, and you might have talked to him, Tom Proctor, he's a supervisor. I think he's at DNEG in London.
Yeah, he was on the podcast, I think right around the same time as Dan Glass, just coincidentally.
It's all the old posse. So Tom,
I know, right?
Tom turned 21 on Matrix. And the reason we knew him is that I was very close to Kodak. And they're like, oh, we have this young kid that went to Rochester Institute of Technology and he wants to get into visual effects. And he's been a Cineon support technician, which means, somebody puts in Cineon's got a bug, can you fix this? Or how do you get this to work? I'm like, sure, I'll take him. We'll see if he's good. And I put him on bullet time. The iconic shot of Keanu or Neo, falling backwards on the rooftop, dodging the bullets, is done by a 21-year-old that had never done a visual effects shot in his life, where I'm basically teaching him how to composite it, writing code at the time, working with my friend George Brushakov. George, there's even more crazy stuff. People are going to be like, oh, Kim's crazy, but the craziest thing, George Brushakov, who was the kid that we'd hired from Berkeley, who'd been part of Debevic's team when they did the Campanile, he was responsible for all the virtual environments. So the photogrammetry, the reprojection, the working out how we do all the view-dependent reprojection and stuff, a little bit with help from a guy called Dan Paponi, but he was Bulgarian. The company we worked for at the time somehow managed to not renew his visa, and he had to go back to Bulgaria. So the backgrounds for the iconic bullet time shots were rendered and generated in Bulgaria, which at the time, internet wasn't really a thing for Bulgaria. His dad worked at a chip design company, reverse engineering Intel chips or something. I don't know what they were doing in Bulgaria at the time. And they were the only ones that had a modem in his city. So it was crazy, Bill. Exabytes being shipped. Bill Collis was involved in that movie. So because we were doing a lot of optical flow interpolation, I had a network of people back in the UK and also at Kodak, and we needed better quality optical flow to interpolate between the positions of the still cameras, because our bullet time ramps up slowly. It's a slowly dolly ramp into the shots. So there's loads of interpolation in there, and to do that, we needed better optical flow. So we contacted a company called Snell and Wilcox in the UK, and they're like, oh, we have this student intern guy that is working on a software version of optical flow. Do you want to see if he can do something? That's Bill Collis, the legendary guy that worked with Simon and the team at the Foundry to grow it into the company that has Nuke and turned into the amazing visual effects entity. Bill did the optical flow interpolation for the first Matrix.
So what you're telling me is that all the iconic stuff is basically a bunch of kids who were having their first crack at working in film.
Yeah, it totally.
With a lot of guidance.
It's funny because I was watching the ILM documentary with the wife the other day with Sandra, and she's like, "Oh my God, ILM at the early days is not it was this crazy place with people basically bluffing their way through it and just being smart. It's just like you bunch of losers," as she said on the Matrix. Yeah. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks.